It's Tuesday, the 20th of January 2015. My name's Robin Yellow and this is Ecotastic. And with me is Kit Knowles.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing, Kit?
Very good, very good. Yeah, looking forward to another Ecotastic.
Great. Well, so am I. And just before we started, you told me the most horrendous joke, which I cannot take out of my mind. So it's there.
Probably not for repeating on air, but
No, and I won't be eating a pork pie for some time to come. Okay, so quite a lot of news this week and some quite important news, but are we ready to go through the news, Kit?
I think we are. I think
we are, and this week our first news article is from Tree Hugger, talking about a prefab wood scraper, to coin a phrase, which is a skyscraper made of wood, proposed with elastic living apartments inside. German architect Leonhard Weingartner is giving Michael Green's tall wood some competition with his elastic woodscaper. It's got everything you can think of and a whole lot more in a 650-foot prefab wood wonder. It's affordable, dense, low maintenance, off-grid. Oh, let me just show you.
There's just a slight issue. It doesn't seem to be made of wood. It seems to be made of concrete and glass.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the wood angle is there, Kit.
Yes, well, those poles running up either side, I think, are concrete. There's a core going down the middle, which I think is concrete. Actually, the pipe, they look like pipes, don't they, those? So they're probably steel. So where's the wood?
Well, it's off-grid, powered by wind, solar, and combined heat and power, and it will provide comfort, safety, and the efficient use of energy without endangering privacy or freedom. Now, it shows here in this kind of graphic at the bottom how it's constructed with this central core, and then the buildings are effectively just slotted onto the side.
So like a Jenga building.
Yeah, well, sort of. It's like a massive version of Jenga. But look, doesn't this look fantastic here? We've got sort of, some, I don't know, swimming pools, and I don't know what these pods are with chairs. And
there's like 6 micro pools.
I tell you what would worry me about it is all the glass. And I mean, you're very high up. There's a lot of glass. I'm not sure what the innovation here is.
Well, the issue being, and this is a serious point, is the UK are currently in a position to be one of the worst affected for future overheating potentials, on the basis that we consider ourselves in a sort of a temperate environment. We don't see particularly extreme temperatures, but as we start to see the increase in temperatures, architecturally speaking, we're one of the worst places to suffer from overheating issues, and that's those glass Jenga blocks look distinctly like they're going to have some major cooling requirements.
Well, one of the features of the building is that it uses electroglass. When a current is applied, they darken, so it can be automatically controlled to prevent the amount of heat that comes in it. But yes, I hear what you mean. I mean, I've never worked in a glass building where it hasn't been required a lot of cooling in the summer and a lot of heating in the winter.
I mean, also the shape. Obviously, you've got huge quantities of external wall there. You've got your floors exposed, your roof exposed. So a lot of the benefit that you get from a high rise is going to be downgraded on that basis. But additionally, the electrochromatic glass doesn't cut out 100% of heat gain. It just reduces it. And so there's some pretty big dangers of overheating, I would say, in that, and then also overcooling. I can't see how it's going to be energy efficient. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of energy generation. It said combined heat and power. It mentioned heat pumps, did it? So it seems to be going for just about everything it can claw its hands on the basis that it's not particularly renewable design, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but I'm a big fan of the phrase wood scraper.
Which it isn't. It's more of a concrete scraper.
Yes, correct. So wood scraper is the thing that does it for me, but as Kit says...
Why don't we try for a good one next week, one that's actually a wood scraper? What was that one that it's competing against at the top there? It was saying wood scraper's going to... wood scraper competition between two. This is going to make the other one look rubbish, but I reckon the other one, if it's made of actual wood, will probably win the wood scraper competition. What was it at the top?
Yes. Well, that is Michael Green's tall wood.
Yeah, let's do that.
To build wood buildings 30 stories high. So you can see this is made of wood. I'm not sure I'd want to be in that in a high wind.
That's pretty tall for a wood building.
So much. Also, I'm not so sure wood. You know, I look. I guess there's a fire risk, isn't there, no matter what you build a house out of. But wood, I would have thought, could suffer particularly badly from that. But I don't know.
That's another bit of tech is all this kind of the treatment for wood. You can impregnate it to make it amazingly inert in the presence of fire. But when you're dealing with fire, the best approach is to put a lot of effort into minimizing the likelihood of the fire occurring in the first place, and then the second best approach is to focus on the kind of exiting and the spread of fire. But almost always people put too little focus on the former and too much focus on the latter.
Indeed. Tree Hugger also reported this week about an article called "Dudes, You're Driving Too Much." US men drive 63% more than women on average, which is, another fact from the United States. But what I thought was interesting was this graph they produced here, which talked about, excuse me, the total number of vehicle miles traveled in a year, which was a staggering 3 billion. And that's British billion, so that's actually 3 trillion. Which was a lot, but they talk about this concept of peak car. I'm just going to pop it up on the screen here. This graph here shows from the 1970s the number of miles traveled per year, and you can see there's sort of steady growth all the way up to the crash of 2008, and then it's leveled off. So what they're calling is this peak car, or perhaps a temporary plateau. Time will tell. KITT, have we reached peak car?
I don't know. I mean, you made the point earlier that that it's got to have something to do with the price of oil, obviously, that being the main cost in running a car. So I presume the latest effect on the price of Brent crude should see a return to an increase in miles. So I guess it would be over the next 5 years. If you get a lower oil price and that plateau remains, then you probably have hit peak car. Does it mention anything about any other factors other than the price of oil having an effect?
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't theorize particularly well on what and why. But of course, clearly in the United States, where a much smaller proportion of the cost of a gallon of gasoline is taxation, they're very sensitive to the oil price, and the oil price has been high for several years, and that would have dampened demand. But I think there's several forces at work here, including fuel-efficient cars. So smaller cars have become more popular in the United States with the more with the larger cost of gasoline, and also, making a decision not to make that trip because of the cost of gas, even though they still pay a tiny amount for their petrol compared to Europeans.
Do you think sort of working from home and any of the kind of technological advancements IT-wise are going to be leading people to smaller commutes or no commutes at all?
Well, possibly, but of course the effect of teleworking, I think, was at its strongest in 2000 to 2005, and there's certainly been a maturation of teleworking, a kind of a leveling out of the amount of home working that's done. So I think we won't know. I mean, it's a combination of a lot of forces that are creating this effect, and we'll never truly get to the bottom of it for another 20 years, I would have thought. But nevertheless, interesting speculation. Talking of interesting things, as the Chinese say, we live in interesting times, and a Chinese company has 3D printed a cement chateau and a 5-story apartment building. Again, Tree Hugger, one of my favorite publications, reported about a 3D printed house in April that people in China couldn't believe and thought it was a fraud. And this company is squirting out fiber reinforced cement made from waste materials and construction debris into complex concrete trusses that were tilted up into buildings. Amazing stuff, even though they don't look that great. KITT, 3D printed buildings, are they the future?
I mean, it obviously is quite amazing stuff, but whether or not that has any kind of cost saving, it mentioned using sort of sort of post-consumer waste or previous construction waste as the feedstock for the 3D printer. So I guess there's got to be some benefit there. Having said that, I would guess there's still a hell of a lot of sort of virgin Portland cement that's going to have to be squirted in there to give you the products that they're trying to produce, which means effectively what they've got there is a concrete home. So I would suggest that the insulation values and the air tightness, because it looks like there's tons of little rings all stuck together. I can't imagine that that's fantastic when it comes to air tightness, although that's probably something you could get over if you change the design in terms of 3D printers. I mean, obviously it's...
When you say rings, what do you mean?
Well, I don't know. If you look at the striations on that on those 3D printers, it looks like they've created... You know, there's two ways of making a pot, right? When you do your pottery class and you've got that spinny table, and the baby way of doing it is where you make lots of rings and you basically wind it up and then you smooth the rings out on the spinny table. It looks a bit like that, doesn't it? And so anything which is going to have a kind of a disconnected element that's gone together. Again, if you look at the wall actually on the side there, it looks like maybe every 6 to 8 rings there's like a joint. So I can't imagine any of that has got any kind of thermal performance at all. And then I wonder what they're filling in the middle. Obviously, I saw an image before with rebar.
Here.
There you go.
So
yeah,
there
rebar.
is the gap.
So there's some reinforcement. And then
yeah,
what
but then it's
pouring
a
in
case of
between.
putting insulating material in there,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, so what you're actually looking there is a steel and concrete apartment block. So as the materials used go, it's pretty old school, and in terms of what you actually want in a building, I can't imagine that's a particularly high performing structure. So I'd say that it's I guess with most things it's new and shiny. You start relatively basic, and that's what they've done. It's pretty basic design, isn't it?
Well, you heard it first, not a very high performing building. But talking of performance, GoGo Rose smart scooter aims to let customers ditch the cord for swappable batteries. Now, GoGo Rose, I'm not sure how you would pronounce that, have developed a battery-powered smart scooter which has got a unique battery replacement system. When the battery is depleted, customers can snap it out of its aluminium monocoque design chassis and put it into a bank where they're immediately given access to a full one, and off they go again. Now, I promised not to do a car story this week, Kit, so I did a bike story. Are electric bikes going to be our future?
I don't know. I've actually, out of all of them, that's the one I've been tempted by the most. Not necessarily the GoGo Rose, but like an electric scooter. There's an electric bike called a Zero, which I was looking at a few years back. But I guess, I mean, it's always that thing about sort of danger and driving a scooter or a bike. But you know, some pretty advanced cultures rely upon these things. You know, Europe-wide, France and Italy particularly have a lot, don't they? So I don't know. I think it's probably a really nice idea because it's super slimline, super sleek, lightweight. I think the big downsides to ordinary sort of bikes and scooters is the engines used in them are deeply inefficient. But you know, if you swap it for an electric drive chain, then blimey, it must be. Look at him, wheel spinning off there. Absolutely what we need.
Well, it claims to have 100 miles of range. I don't know how true that is.
It sounds impressive.
It does sound impressive, actually, doesn't it? But then, of course, you're never going to get away from the fact that you're laying your life on the line when you hop onto a scooter, no matter whether it's petrol or battery-powered. The Telegraph reported this week about a respected eco group slamming solar panel farm plans. These eco warriors, so-called, have hit out at a plan to build a major solar panel installation on protected grassland. Now, obviously, Telegraph calls them nature experts and uses phrase like slammed the decision. But West Dorset Council have approved plans for the renewable energy project on Rampage Down, one of the largest areas of lowland acid grassland in England and designated a site of special scientific interest for its wildlife importance. KITT, PVs or grassland?
Well, I mean, firstly, who the hell is their planning officer? I don't know how they got it through on a triple SI. Jesus, I've just been dealing with some triple SIs, and you can do nothing. It's ridiculously strict. There's no form of structures allowed. You're not allowed to. I mean, so I was looking at purchasing a woodland, which was a triple SI. You can't even take dead, fallen trees off the site, on the basis that it's all designed to retain the kind of site in its sort of initial and inherent sort of makeup. So risking disturbing any one of those plants or animals or whatever it's specific for. I can only say that triple SIs they're designated for specific reasons. So if it's the fact that it's a particular acid grassland, I guess the plans that they submitted have clearly demonstrated that it's going to have absolutely no effect on what this site is special for, I guess. But who knows? I mean, if it's going to be going onto a site, I think this might be a bit of a whistleblow, because obviously triple SIs are normally tough to do anything with. And for good reason, obviously.
Well, it's a 24 megawatt solar farm, which is large, consisting of 120,000 PV panels on steel frames, installed across the 72 hectare site, the former BBC Rampage Down transmitter station, following the demolition of 34 out of the 35 radio masts and towers.
Right, so it's in an area of triple SI, but it is replacing an existing structure, which is probably and they're probably being able to submit saying that this is going to have a lot more freedom of movement for the triple SI than the existing structure. There's got to be some kind of improvement going in there as well, I guess. I mean, it's ridiculous when you use phrase like nature experts, and then what was in the title? There was something else, wasn't there?
Respected eco group, SLAM solar panel farm.
So, and this is meaningless. And they used, actually, wasn't it Eco Warrior that I saw there as well?
Nature experts, Eco Warrior, conservationists.
So these are really
named.
These are really good buzzwords for the listener to listen out for or watch out for when they're reading any articles, as to decide whether or not to bother reading on. Typically.
I've never seen that sort of thing in the Telegraph before. The BBC, however, have reported that 2014 was the warmest year on record. According to American government scientists, the result that 2014 was 1.24 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 0.68 degrees Celsius, above the long-term average, means that 14 out of the 15 warmest years on record have occurred since the turn of the century. And this was published on Friday by
Shall we
NASA
look at that?
and
Can
NOAA.
we look at that site, Robin?
Which one? The NASA site?
The one that you're reading from. Sorry, I'm still on solar power here.
Ah, yes. Sorry, bit of a fail. You'll have to fill while I reconnect.
Oh, right. You've had a bit of a connection issue. No worries.
Connection fail.
So what we were talking about there is a BBC article, and that was on warmest year or warmest few areas. Past few years, wasn't it? What was the statistic exactly? I mean, 14 of the last 15. Okay, there you go. There was another article that I was reading.
Here you can see it in this graph.
Yeah, it's an incredible steep curve, and there's another article that I was reading that was talking about the if you're a 29-year-old or younger, then there hasn't been a month that you've lived through that has been below the average for any given month over the 20th century. So if you take 100 years worth of averages, you've always been above them if you're just 29 years old, which is a really scary statistic, obviously. And there's a lovely little animation to watch.
There's a little video. Shall I play the video?
Yeah, get that going, and just look how it starts. So
we're back in the 1890s.
The 1890s. So you can see it's a very blue world, which is on the basis that it's 2 degrees cooler than it is now. or well, actually, I say 2 degrees cooler than it is now. They're taking it 2 degrees over a medium, so we've got a total 4-degree
Now we're
range.
going into the 80s.
Yeah,
The
and then when it
90s,
ramps up hugely at the end here,
2000.
as you can tell, as it hits the 2000s. So that's really representative of the last 15 years, where we're saying 14 out of the 15 years have been hottest on record. So
I'm just going to play. I'm going to pause here. So here is 1991.
yeah,
You can already see the effect of global warming. If I just carry on playing a little bit to 2000, there's already a massive appreciable difference in temperature.
You're basically going from the 1980s to 90s, sorry, the 1880s to the 1990s, and what you've done is you've increased about 3 degrees, and then within 15 years you've added another degree on top of that, in effect.
It is, and it's very dangerous here in the northern latitudes above Greenland, where of course there is a lot of fresh water trapped in ice, which if released back into the Atlantic could seriously damage the Atlantic conveyor, which is the mechanism by which warm water is
The Gulf Stream.
The Gulf Stream, which takes warm water from the Gulf up to northern Europe, gives us our temperate climates. That's why we all live here.
Did you read that article as well, Robin? There's a bunch of stuff being shown over. We should have pulled this one up really, because it all links in. But there's a bunch of articles released around the kind of misinterpretation of the results of sea level rise and its severity, and how we've misjudged it, and it's going to be much worse than previously expected. I don't know by what percentage, but I remember seeing 3 or 4 article headlines like that last week. So this is all relatively doom and gloom stuff, unfortunately.
It is. Now, often I hear the argument about El Nino and La Nina, which are 7 or 14-year events, are they? I should get my facts straight before I start spouting, but they are weather events which are well understood, which can have a dampening effect on warming or cooling. But clearly, you know, let's just play that video again. I'm going to go back to the 1980s or the 1970s. Look at that world in the 1970s, freezing, get a coat, and suddenly we get into the 80s.
It's not showing on my screen, so I'm guessing you've frozen again.
It's not showing again. I've had another technical fail. I will fix that for you right away and try to make sure. But it is frightening stuff, isn't it?
It's. I mean, just the starkness of change. It's incredible, and how, you know, not a great deal changes for well over 100 years, and then just boom, it all happens in the last few years. It is representative of where we're heading, I guess. That's the scary bit.
Indeed. And now let's move from the news into KITT's Tech Corner. And this week, KITT, we're looking at solar passive design. Now, there's a nice little video here which was actually taken in your house, I think, a couple of years ago. And there's a much younger version of you hosting it. I'm going to play that video while you tell us what is solar passive design.
Okay, so yeah, a few years ago, a charity that I worked for called the Old Home Super Homes, they basically wanted me to talk about this section of my house specifically, which I've dubbed the solarium. And basically, what I'm aiming to do in this section of the property is, well, it's twofold really. Time and again, you hear people talk about you know, the benefits of having lots of glazing, because you can harness the solar gains and you can actually generate a lot of heat from glazing. What I wanted to sort of demonstrate with this is that principle is possible, but you've got to bear in mind that I was coming at it from a very pessimistic perspective when I was actually going into this. I created effectively the worst case. I got incredible quantities of glass in there, and I also removed the wall entirely between the existing property and the new space, so it was completely open planned. The issue with that is that whatever happens in terms of the temperature in that zone now affects the whole rest of my house quite directly. And this is quite common. A lot of people purchase houses, they'll actually pay extra to get one with a south-facing rear. They'll extend it, put in a bigger kitchen, and they'll whack on some form of conservatory-style space. And then if they're really unfortunate, they'll knock out the walls so that this conservatory is linked in elsewhere. Now, the the reason there's such risk is because if you look at a passive house window and a passive house wall, those windows you're looking at there are effectively that sort of level. But if you look at a passive house window and a passive house wall, square meter of each, you'll be paying somewhere between 4 and 8 times as much per square meter of glass, and it will be performing around about 4 to 8 times worse than a square meter of wall in terms of thermal performance. So of course, glass does let in heat during the day, but it massively lets out huge quantities of heat during the rest of the period, and that's the issue, because you get these overcooled spaces, so the temperature drops down hugely. And then when people think, yay, now I'm getting a bit of sunlight and getting a bit of heat in there, predominantly what happens is it very, very quickly overshoots the amount of heat, the amount of temperature that you're wanting. So you might want a 23, 22 degree comfort temperature, and you'll go down at sort of 15 degrees overnight and shoot up to 28 degrees during a summer's day in there, and it's deeply uncomfortable. So you get these huge temperature oscillations. So what all my kind of gesturing was about just then was me trying to describe what's actually happening with the sun, sunlight, sun energy, and how I'm trying to trap that energy so that it doesn't retain, it doesn't remain in the airspace, which causes this huge temperature oscillation. So what we're playing with here is this idea of decrement factor, which looks at the temperature swing externally versus the temperature swing internally, and tries to create a dampening effect by using concepts like decrement delay and solar factors in glass, and predominantly thermal mass. So that's why I've got this black slate floor, because it's matte and it's black and it can absorb a load of heat directly. And instead of laying it on a dot and dabbed adhesive, where you kind of shove a few blobs of adhesive down and level that out and sort of stick your tiles in place, I've used a one-coat adhesive. So every part of the square meterage of that tile is connected with the slab beneath. And the benefit there is that you release a load more thermal mass into that space, because it's the surface temperature or the surface connection that joins to the space that gives you that interface, but you need to have that bulk of thermal mass to absorb the heat in. So what happens is during the day, the black matte surface absorbs loads of heat. Instead of that heat going into the air, which creates this discomfort, this overheating, then it gets absorbed into the slab beneath it. And then during the night, when you get that temperature drop, the slab then releases that heat back out, because it's always chasing the air temperature, either bringing it up or pulling it back down to maintain a much more neutral temperature, or moderate temperature. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing now. I'm trying to enable me to benefit from solar gains without suffering from the typical losses that you get there. And that roof view you're seeing there, those capping pieces, I was playing with a few concepts there. That's completely my design, and what I've been doing is creating these U-shaped capping pieces that go over the top, and you've got these rafters underneath, and I've kind of buried into them as well. So the rafters are semi-hollow, and those capping pieces have got this kind of hollow core, and I've put this piece of rigid insulation that spans between where the glass is, and sort of the capping pieces then grip down and squeeze that insulation, and also squeeze the glass panels in between. And the beauty of what's going on there is that now I've got this thermally broken shell, so the glass is capable of being airtight and performing very well in terms of thermal retention. And you can see there's a joint halfway down. That was those panels, triple glazed panels, I think they weigh something like 75 kilograms each. So I couldn't make them just one piece. They would cost a fortune, and they were very heavy, and I'd have to get a crane involved. So instead I split them, and when I did the split on the triple glazing, if you can imagine, you've got 3 layers of glass. The top layer at the end, where the other 2 stopped, projected further, and so you could overlap the top piece on top of the bottom piece and get a very nice airtight, weathertight detail. So that was again another little trick that I was pulling out to enable me to. You
can sort of see that here, can't you? Halfway, yes. You've got. So there's actually 8 panels here.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And 8 triple glazed panels. And would this glass panel, this whole roof here, be as thermally efficient as an insulated wall?
No way, not even close. No, that's about as advanced a conservatory roof that exists. Those triple glazed units are 44 millimeters thick. They're argon filled triple glazed with 2 coats of low emissivity. So you get all warm edge spacer bars, everything you can chuck at it basically, and they're mounted on thermally broken rafters, and it's probably about 1/8 of the performance of the wall that you see that green tree wallpaper on.
All right, interesting, great.
That green wallpaper you're seeing there has a U value for any geeks out there that know what I'm talking about, of about 0.1, whereas the glass has an overall pane of about pane U value of about a UW they call it, of about 0.8.
Great, thanks very much for that. So now, if anyone asks you what passive solar design is, you can say it's this. KITT, I think that's the end of the show this week. Thank you so much for this week's contribution.
No worries. Hopefully, Robin, you can shove the URL somewhere for folks to get hold of that video and have a read or watch. There's a lot more on there in terms of the specifics about how it's working.
Well, now that you mention it, we do have a website which will have our show notes in. We can put that onto the YouTube, but we're looking at getting another website called ecotasticpodcast.blogspot.com, which will have the show linked to the YouTube and the downloadable podcast and some other information in there as well. Watch this space on that one. It isn't quite finished yet. For the moment, YouTube is the place to go to get this information. And for those of you listening on the podcast, YouTube is where the videos come out of. So thank you so much, KITT, for this week. I think that's it for now. That's all from me, Robin Yellow.
That's all from me. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Adios. Cheers, KITT. And thank you so much for listening and watching. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.